Councillor Derek Wan today.
Okay, thank you. Right. Declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Bell, Councillor Devine. Right, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Item 7, I'm an elected member on the Community Justice Partnership. That's report 5821. No financial interest, I'll stay in and discuss. And items 8 and 9, I'm an elected member of the IGB and chair the audit committee. And I have a specific dispensation for those, so I'll stay in and discuss. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Convener. Item 6, report 5721. I've got a general exclusion as a council appointed board member of Angus Alive. I'll be staying in.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, exactly the same as Councillor Devine.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest?
Yes, Chair, exactly the same as Bill Duff and Councillor Devine. I'm on the Angus Alive, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay, right. Councillor Duff, can you take your hand down, please? Right. Can we move on to the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and ask Gordon Pride to lead us into that, starting on page 7.
Thank you very much, Convener. As you mentioned, this will be my last visit to the Scrutiny Audit Committee, and I will be replaced by Area Commander Stephen Wood. Stephen's an experienced officer who knows the area well and will be returning to the management team the local management team having spent a period of time working with in one of our national functions. I'm currently, as you'd expect, working with Stephen to ensure we have a smooth handover in April. Returning to the performance report, before I ask members to note and comment on the report, can I ask you to look at page 14 of the report? Here we see we have the 12 headline indicators, 8 of which are currently below target, 2 of which are currently slightly above target, and the final 2 being projected to be more than 10% above target for by the end of the year. To allow us to discuss this in more detail, Convener, if you wouldn't mind, I'll ask Scott Gibson to give an overview of some of the detailed elements of this report.
Thank you, Gordon. Thanks, Convener. Good afternoon, everyone. Just referring to the performance highlights page of our report, page 15 in your report pack, this sets out the key successes and challenges that we faced during Q3. And as Gordon said, we're asking the committee to note these. As per normal arrangements, I'll run through these performance highlights, and then following that, I'm happy to answer any questions relating to any area of the report. So starting off with bullet points 1 and 2, there's been an increase in the number of accidental dwelling fires during Q3. However, the number of non-fatal casualties is below the 3-year average, which is encouraging. The target for accidental dwelling fires has been reduced this year in line with the SFRS performance management framework, and generally the numbers in Angus are quite low and we don't have any trends or areas of concern at present. The incidents in Q3 mostly involved cooking and involved someone under the influence. However, there was one more severe incident up at Glen Prosen, which I've highlighted in Appendix 3 and provided a little bit more information on. Because of the number of ADFs dropping, in general, it's having a positive impact on the number of fire-related casualties being low as well. Added to this is the fact that people in households are better prepared due to the extensive work we're continuing to carry out with our home safety visits and partnership working, which we've built up over the past few years. We've got good referral pathways in place in Angus, I'm happy to say, and we do target the most vulnerable in the communities from protection of fire and other harm. And again, there's evidence of this in your Appendix 1, which covers the good work carried out throughout Q3 in this area. COVID is still impacting on our face-to-face interactions with some residents, but we continue with those at risk and remotely advise the remainder. One area to highlight is a new initiative using virtual reality that we've started up, where we can use it to educate children on the risks from fire from their own classrooms, and we are progressing this. There's also opportunities to progress this into road traffic collisions where we can put people in a simulation where there'd be a passenger in a road traffic collision. So we will be exploring this a bit further going forward as an education tool. Moving on to bullet point 3, we've only experienced 3 non-domestic fires during Q3, which again is below the average. These type of fires continue to be low in Angus because of the fire safety management arrangements within these buildings, and generally that are of a good standard. We're getting assurances of that through building standards colleagues and through our fire safety audit regimes. We're on track to complete our audit programme for the year by the end of Q4, which is good considering the impact we've had throughout the year with COVID. More information can be found on the Forfar Bingo Hall fire in Appendix 3, which accounted for one of the incidents in non-domestic buildings. Referring to bullet point 4, we've highlighted the below average number of road traffic collisions and the related casualties during the quarter. These were mainly focused around the Kirriemuir and Forfar areas, and there were no fatal casualties, I'm pleased to report, throughout Q3, and only 2 non-fatal casualties, which is again is below the average. Just to provide a little bit more context around the other special services that we're increasingly involved in surrounding priority 3, away from RTC's road traffic collisions, there were 69 other special services during the quarter. Over half of these were affecting entry and assisting other agencies, predominantly where there was concern for the occupier. There were also several flooding incidents in early October between Forfar and Montrose, and the remainder are made up of different types of release, be it from machinery, lifts, and assisting in lifting and removing casualties. On bullet point 5, I've highlighted that UFAS, unwanted fire alarm signal incidents, were down again during Q3, which is great to see. However, just a hint of caution without knowing what impact COVID has had on this. Over the past 3 years, SFRS have been trying to reduce these by 5% year on year, which has been quite challenging due to the improvements in building regs and the trends of more open plan buildings, which has led to an increase in the levels of fire detection and more activations. Our prevention and protection function continue to work on unwanted fire alarm signals and the reduction strategies around it, and looking at the rate of response we attend these incidents with. And we're still very much focused on reducing these through working with premises that have persistent call-outs. Referring to bullet point 6, I've highlighted the increase in deliberate primary fires over the Q3 of this year, along with an increase in deliberate secondary fire numbers. There continue to be a couple at Rossi Secure Unit in Montrose, and we're still working with them on targeting education initiatives at young offenders. We're continuing with the youth engagement work in the Forfar and Arbroath areas where the majority of deliberate fires are occurring, and along with our Police Scotland colleagues, have identified offenders and are putting them through our Fire Setters initiative. We've also managed to get education packages onto the schools' curriculums online to assist with this. And while numbers in Angus are relatively low in comparison to other local authority areas, it is the one area that I'd like to see reduced further. COVID's proved very restrictive, as you'll know, with our face-to-face interactions, but hopefully we can make an impact on this as we start to move back to normality, hopefully later in the year. And finally, referring to bullet points 7 and 8, I would like the committee to note that although during Q3 we have faced difficulties again regarding training of our staff, we've managed to ensure our crews are continually prepared for their role and have continued to risk assess the premises that are high risk remotely and continue to adapt our way of working in line with government guidelines. We've also supported the local resilience partnership throughout the pandemic, offering up our services as required and trying to support the community where we can. And with some restrictions easing, I draw your attention to some of the great partnership working which is ongoing in Angus in Appendixes 1 and 2. In particular, I would like to offer praise for the effort of our staff across Angus for the work that was put in during Child Poverty Week in Angus in October, and also in assisting the vulnerable in their communities. And also the work that was achieved over the festive period, providing food, toys and clothes through donations from friends and colleagues. That concludes. Thanks for listening. I'm now happy to accept any questions, Convener.
Right, before we take the questions, I'm working with my agenda sitting at one side, and I just realised I missed the minutes of the previous meeting. So before we go on to questions, can we agree that the minute of the previous meeting is a correct minute?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks,
That way I
convener.
can
Sorry,
see-
I was going to flag that up once this item was finished, but you beat me to it. Thank you.
It's quite all right, Karen. Right, in that case, questions. I have Councillor Brays.
Yes, thanks, convener.
Page, please.
Yes, page 14.
14. Councillor Boyd. Page. Sorry, you're on mute, Brian.
It's a general question, but it's partly related to 14.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Mine's page 15, convener, thanks.
And Councillor Duff.
821, convener.
Right, okay then, can we start off with Councillor Brays on page 14, please?
Yes, thanks, convener. And firstly, I would like to thank Gordon Pride for all his efforts and particularly in relation to this committee. I've always found them very helpful. My question really is on unwanted fire alarm signals, and we talked about persistent UFASs. And presumably the fire service just has to persist with those people who have these unwanted signals. But I did wonder if maybe you could talk us through just a wee bit about what the engagement is with people who have persistent unwanted signals, and also what sanctions and penalties might be available.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brays. Scott, if you're happy, I'll start with this and you can give some of the local context. We have a number of current engagement processes in place. We have a staged mechanism where every time we attend any unwanted fire alarm signals, our operational crews are looking to give advice, give some preventative information and stop any reoccurrence of these. We also monitor all unwanted fire alarm signals, which allows us to build up a picture. And then we also have sort of various stages. So when we move to 5 over a 3-month period, we then offer further advice, and there's triggered some national triggers. We then have the ability, as we go to, I believe it's 10 over a 6-month period and 20 over a 9-month period, to look at different sanctions with the potential of discussing how we reduce the number of appliances and reduce the way we attend that incident. We will work through these processes to be supportive to the premise owner itself, and to be honest, every time we engage with the premise owner, in the main, it is very positive, and we're able to instruct them and give them some advice. In addition to that, we have a number of national processes looking at various ways where we can address these in a different path, because there are a number of different ways it is addressed UK-wide, and we're still developing these, but once we're in a position where we're able to bring them out for wider public consultation, we'll make sure the committee are made aware if they are appropriate to be delivered in the Angus area.
Yes, are there any sanctions or penalties that can be levied against people with a persistent problem?
Certainly, we don't look to go down the sanctions route, but what we are able to do is identify the cost to us and the cost to the building owner. And from memory, the cost to the fire and rescue service on average for an unwanted fire alarm signal is just under £1,000. But on average, it's I think it's around about 1,600 per premise. So it makes business sense for businesses to reduce these as much as possible, because it's the interruption in their business activity. It has that immediate cost to them, and also the ongoing elements as well. But where possible, we'll try to work in a positive manner, and I've got a very good team, not only on the fire appliances, but also to support through our fire safety enforcement officers that are able to give good advice to drive these numbers as low as practicable.
But there is no there is no way that you can retrieve that £1,000 cost.
No, we look to provide a service, and our legislation doesn't allow us to charge for that service.
That's fine, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Boyd, page 14. You're still mute, Brian. That's it.
There we are. Thank you, Alec. Yes, it was partly doing number 14, and I'm thinking back to how it's taken 4 years on the most dreadful fire that we saw at Cameron House. And I wonder within this page whether there's something that Scrutiny and Audit would be interested in, as to ensure that something as dreadful as what happened down there. We're very much a tourism area. We have lots of old hotels that would be dealing with the likes of fire, chimneys and fires and ashes and things like that. And I wonder, is our area up to speed of how we approach all these businesses, but also whether there could be something brought back to us saying that, I know we could never say it can never happen again, but it would be good for us to know if there are any ones that are really trying to not do with the great spirit that you're doing in Angus, with making sure that when people stay here, that they're safe here.
Certainly, thank you very much. What we do have is a risk-based audit programme and also some national advice. In addition to this, I know I'm leaving the area, but I'd be more than happy to confirm with Stephen Wood, and if the committee would like, we could bring some information from Cameron House, the lessons learned, and bring that to this committee so that they are aware and cited on some of the elements we're able to learn from that incident, and able to ensure our officers are aware throughout the whole of Scotland as part of our ongoing development of staff.
Do you think that's a good idea, Councillor King, for Scrutiny and Audit?
Yes, I think that's something that could be brought back to a future Scrutiny and Audit committee. But bearing in mind what I saw on the reports and the videos that were shown, I think there was a fairly major failure in the management of that hotel in terms of what was going on. So I'm hoping that there aren't any hotels in Angus or guest houses in Angus who are doing the sort of things that was happening at Cameron House.
Yeah, I'm with you, Alec. I certainly hope it's not, but it'd be nice for the report to know, for us to know as this scrutiny to make sure this is not happening.
To be fair, at Cameron House, they had been well warned about it in the previous, and they were still continuing. And there's nothing you can do if they're willfully continuing. Right.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell, page 15.
Yeah, thank you very much, convener, and Gordon. Thank you for supporting this committee, and all the best for moving on. I wanted to pick up on the increases in deliberate primary and deliberate secondary fires. Last year, when restrictions lifted, we had some real concerns in some of the rural beauty spots in my ward around rough camping and fires. People were cutting down trees and setting fire to them. And I know even over the worst of the winter with the cold, wildfires are still a problem. And I was aware of the media coverage over that. I just wondered if there's anything that's currently being done to kind of target landowners, like Scottish Water or farmers in some of those most rural areas on a national basis in preparation for I guess what we might consider a bit of an onslaught as restrictions lift and people start to come out again to our tourist hotspots where there were significant issues last year. I know it's a concern in those communities, and I'm currently working with a range of partners around Lintrathen and Backwater, which is going quite well, but I know there are other areas where people who live there, the communities, have huge concerns about things like fires taking hold, and obviously the kind of littering issue as well, which isn't your problem, but the fires is everyone's problem for sure.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bear. I'll ask Scott to pick up some of the elements first, if that's okay, and then I'll address some of the additional national elements. Scott.
Thanks, Gordon. Thanks, Councillor Bell. Yeah, so as you'll be aware, following the reports from, which would have been last year, Councillor Bell, we did do a bit of work with our police colleagues and Scottish Water around the Lintrathen area locally, and we continue to engage in that kind of broader partnership locally to try and ensure that we've got all these areas covered. As far as other areas are concerned, we've got our spring thematic action plan through the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service that we run annually, and we're at the time of year where we've started to look at secondary fires and wildfires, etc. through that. So we're doing nationally a lot of media coverage, and there'll be a media campaign on social media and on the news outlets to try and advertise that and try and reduce that. As you know as well, we've found it difficult. A lot of the work that we do locally and nationally is face-to-face and engagement with groups of youths and schools, etc., with our partners, and we have struggled away from that over the past few months. So as soon as restrictions permit, then we will be looking to get back into schools as much as possible to target that age group and try and make sure that we're putting the education, because I think it's probably important that to emphasise that we're predominantly aiming at the education side of things as opposed to prosecution, where we'd rather try and educate the groups that are causing these issues into the consequences of their actions first. Anything to add to that, Gordon?
Yes, thank you very much, Scott. In addition to that, what we have is for the more significant remote rural fires, we've got a wildfire group that focuses on giving us an early warning, so we know exactly when the greater risk will be for these fires to grow and become significantly more challenging to tackle, and that allows us to ensure our resources are stood up in the right area and make sure we are prepared and ready for any fire that may start small but have the potential to grow to something more significant. We're able to address that far quicker.
Okay. All right, Councillor Duff, page 21.
Yeah, thanks, convener, and I would like to endorse the comments about Gordon Pride and wish him well for the next stage of his career. The question I had really was at the bottom of page 21, the flooding incidents. I just want a wee bit more detail there. I think a lot of us are conscious there's been a lot more flooding in the last few years. How many would the Fire and Rescue Service expect to deal with in a year? And are we talking about flooded roads or properties? That would be useful information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Duff. I'll ask Scott to give some of the local detail on this. And again, I'll pick up on any national elements that are required. Scott.
Thanks, Gordon. Thanks, Councillor Duff. Yeah, in relation to the flooding incidents, I can talk through the incidents that we did have around about early October in Q3. So it was predominantly around between Forfar, Ardroth, Montrose area. In actual fact, there was around 9 incidents that we mobilised to and dealt with throughout that three-day period that we did have some flooding. But as you say, wider, it is something that is becoming more apparent with the effect that climate change is having and the severe weather episodes that we're having that are becoming more regular. So just as a bit probably more of reassurance than anything else, that our crews are all trained to a base level in water awareness. They all have wet weather PPE and we annually train for these type of events. Within the Perth, Kinross, Angus and Dundee area, we do have 2 fully equipped water teams with boats that within a short time scale can attend any incidents in the whole of that area. And we are looking now to move towards what we are calling a level 2 response, which is a flood response in areas which will include 1 or 2 Angus stations. And locally as well, we have got in Forfar an environmental protection unit that carries equipment such as submersible pumps, etc., that can assist us with these types of incidents. And within Dundee, we've got a high volume pump for larger scale incidents that we can call upon locally for anything more significant. Does that answer your question, Councillor
Yeah,
Duffy, you
yeah.
want
Thanks,
to go?
Scott. Thanks very much for that. That's a detailed answer, and appreciate that. Thank you.
Certainly, Councillor Duffy, if you don't mind me adding a couple of small elements. It's not only the fire and rescue service. Obviously, we are prepared to deal with that. It's very much a multi-agency approach, and we've got very strong partnership links with local authority, police and others. And that allows us to have that coordinated response through the local resilience partnership, just to make sure we have that joined up approach throughout the whole of Angus for these incidents.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Devine, you've come in.
Yes, because it's not a question, it's really just a comment. It's kind of on page 27, really. You're talking about the virtual reality. I mean, as usual, you are being really imaginative with your initiatives. This sounds pretty strong. This could be quite, I think, changing for young people to experience what it's like to be in a fire. So I do appreciate that, especially being a Forfar councillor, and you've had some problems around Forfar with fires. So thank you very much. But I would also like to say, as Scott said, thanks to all your staff who put in such an effort with getting clothes and toys and food for some of our most needy families. So you are very community minded. So thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Councillor Boyd, you did notify you wanted to make a general comment.
Yes, it was similar to what Councillor Devine was saying as well. If we look at page 30, if you could sincerely pass on my thanks to James Kinnear and the rest of the team down at Carnoustie Fire Station, who not only did the festive appeal, are now running, you can see on my Facebook page now, the Carnoustie Fire Station are still wonderfully managing to deal with a great food bank. Sadly, we have to have a food bank, of course, but we do have this food bank in Carnoustie, and they're doing a sterling job there, and therefore I'd like to go on record to thank them all for all the things that they're doing here in Carnoustie. Thank you.
Okay, if we're done with item 4, we're asked to note. I think we have commented on it. Do we agree to note?
Agreed.
Right, thank you. Can we move on to item 5? Can I call on Chief Superintendent Andrew Todd?
Thank you, Convener. I'll just present the report very briefly. Obviously, the report reports against our local police plan for Angus, with objectives linked to the strategic police outcomes for Scotland, but more importantly, the priorities are tied into the Angus community plan. Just draw members' attention to a few of the pages. So page 38 gives that overall plan on a page and how we nest each of the priorities and objectives together. Page 39 provides the overall performance summary as requested by councillors a couple of meetings back, if I recall correctly. And I would just point out the very positive performance that exists across that, but of course, draw members' attention to the entirety of the document and some of the detail that exists within that isn't always explained within actual targets that exist. And on page 62, just want to highlight as well the definition that we've included around hate incidents and hate crime and the differential between those, and trust that helps members' understanding of that really critical, important area of our business. And finally, just draw members' attention to page 74, which is a fresh inclusion that I hope meets with members' approval around the introduction of some data involving complaints about the police. This falls from Dame Ailish Angelini's review of complaints about police and wider conduct matters, and we are keen to bring this forward. We are not yet sophisticated enough to break down the information in a way that members might be able to use to help understand trends over time and over areas, and also to understand the impact of some of these incidents. What we are doing within our division across Tayside, so members here in Angus are some of the first to receive this information, and I would be grateful for any feedback which we can use to help develop how we present that information, all of which is intended to help underpin public confidence in the service that we provide. So happy to take any questions clearly in any part of the report, and I'm obviously joined by Chief Inspector Wayne Morrison, who's your local area commander, and he'll help support me with all the local context that's required. Thank you.
Right, Councillor Devine, are you wanting to make a question, or is that a legacy hand?
No, it's a new hand.
Good.
Page 47.
All right. Councillor Miles.
Page 39.
Councillor Reyes.
Sorry, yes, page 56 and 71, please.
Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks. Page 47 and another question covering page 72, 73. Thanks.
Councillor Duff.
Page 47 and page 55.
35 or 55?
55, 55.
55, thank you. Right, start off with you, Councillor Devine, page 47.
What about page 39?
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Bob. Page 39, yes, it is.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you for your report, and really appreciated the kind of one-page plan and the summary. But with most of the figures are doing very well and reduction in most areas. The one area that does jump out is the fraud, where you've more than double the incidence of fraud crimes, and detection rates have really dropped. Is that due to internet fraud or telephone scams, or is there anything in particular there, or anything you can enlighten us on that area?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And you're right to point that figure out, because it is a discrepancy. If I recall correctly, we discussed this at the previous meeting, and my update then hasn't changed in so much as there are a number of different factors involved within the recording of these figures. Our ability to read across time, so compared to last year, is now open to misinterpretation as a consequence of changes we have made in the counting rules around fraud. And if members will bear with me, in effect, the crime is complete where it's committed, not where the victim is, which might sound odd. But if the crime is being committed from the US or in Africa or in Asia, and the victim is in Forfar, the crime's actually not being committed in our country, was how all crimes previously have been recorded. Now, the victim is still here. We would still record it, action it, investigate it, and if we found the victim, so the crime was committed out with our jurisdiction, we would close that crime off as a no crime and export the information to the jurisdiction that was relevant. That has changed for this year, and we now keep those as open crimes on our system. Clearly, that therefore impacts the detection rates, because there is less opportunity to detect where we may not actually have the jurisdiction responsibilities for those areas. That being said, what it does do is it gives us a very clear and coherent understanding of what the demand is. We always knew this, but we kept it as no crimes on our systems, and that's all appropriately governed through the counting rules that come from Scottish Government agencies. So we've got a more accurate reflection of our crimes. My issue has always been the case that attempting to pursue some of these offenders as a local division is fraught with so much difficulty and so much effort compared to the potential return of capturing them, that divisions are better placed to actually try and prevent the crimes from occurring in the first place, and making sure that the victims don't fall prey to scams that occur, particularly online, where they've been committed from other jurisdictions. So that these figures only double down on that point, that we need to continue to help reduce the number of victims. But what I wouldn't want to suggest to members is that we don't pursue people abroad. Police Scotland has an international unit, and we are tied into many national and international agencies across the world, with some considerable success in repatriating criminals from elsewhere back into Scotland to face justice here. So not something that a local division would do, and certainly not a local area such as Angus, but we do feed in nationally, and what we will do is we will continue to try and work to reduce the opportunities for victims. But I would just caution reading across time as a direct comparator with previous, due to these changes in counting rules.
Yeah, thank you for that. But I do feel it's maybe a nationwide, let's say, program that has to occur to try and reduce these number of crimes. And I know the amount of fraudulent or scam telephone calls I get in a week. It's ridiculous. And I wonder now that people do succumb to these, but I dare say some people are either lonely or unwilling to believe the worst in people, and they often succumb to some of these fraudsters. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Devine, page 47.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the last point, though, convener, if you don't mind. You say that you're plugged into lots of organisations abroad, international organisations. Are you finding any difficulty with Brexit and the European aspect to this? That's one question, but my original one was about Spark, and I was wondering, first of all, how long that's been going on, and is there a good response around this area to it? Are there many people joined up?
Thank you, Councillor Devine. I'll ask Chief Inspector Morrison just to speak in regards to the Spark element and the potential response within our local area. In regards to Brexit, it has an implication clearly, and we've planned for, with Crown Office and others, the management of the implications around that, which the Chief Constable has reported into SPA regularly over the last year or so. It's not something that affects us locally as a division, but it absolutely affects Police Scotland. As I say, the Chief Constable has updated on those matters. In regards to Spark, I'll perhaps just turn to Wayne just now, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chief Super. My understanding, Councillor Devine, is we've been a member now for about 3 or 4 years. It's a very sort of active online service, and obviously there's alerts available. Again, from the people that I know that are in the rural farming industry here, we seem to have a reasonable uptake. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, a lot of good crime prevention stuff, and it's a very active thing online with some useful tips, etc. So I couldn't give you a percentage of how many people have actually taken up, but I think there is a real interest in it.
Thank you, that's good.
Oh, I hope you've taken over, Bill.
You want me to ask my question?
No, I lost it completely there. I lost my internet connection. I think I had a scam call coming in. It happens sometimes when I'm on, in which case I lost my connection. So can I ask where we've got to?
I'm hoping you're just about to ask me to ask a question on page 47.
Right, did Lynn got a reply on page 47?
Yes, she got a satisfactory reply from both police officers, yeah.
Right, if that happens and I disappear again, just take over immediately.
Okay, right.
Right, your question on page 47.
Yeah, it's a slightly cheeky one I've put in there, but I mean, that page is discussing rural crime, and I thought that was the most suitable context to ask this question. I mean, there's been quite a bit of the questions about dogs and dog theft. There's been quite a bit of publicity on the television about that, partly linked to the pandemic. And I know I've had 1 or 2 constituents who seem quite concerned that their pet might get stolen by people. I just really want to know, is that a real issue in Angus? Is that something people are getting over concerned about or not?
I'll ask Wayne just to cover briefly the Angus element, but it is a matter that has been happening, less so recently, but we had a number of thefts from the Perthshire area, particularly in the Western Perthshire area, with a number of dogs recovered far south in the UK. And so it has been happening across the UK, but I think it is sensationalised in the press because it's a good story to put out there. But nonetheless, there is absolutely a kernel of truth to it, and we have seen an increase in the thefts of dogs. But within the Angus area, I'm not aware of it being a specific problem that's been brought to my attention. But I'll ask Wayne just to confirm.
Yeah, I agree with that. As far as I'm concerned, we've not had a theft of a dog reported to us probably, I would say, since the COVID pandemic started, unless folk aren't coming forward. But no, nothing. I would have remembered that as a dog owner myself. Definitely nothing here.
Okay, that's great. I can reassure some of my constituents who are concerned about it and getting a bit maybe over concerned. Thank you.
Right, can we go to Councillor Whiteside on page 47?
Thanks, convener. Sorry, another question on page 47 around the rural crime. It's good to see that overall the acquisitive crime's down, but anecdotally, I've had a few people contacting me with incidents of thefts of quad bikes, etc., which is causing them quite a lot of hassle because they need them for their work. So I just wanted a little bit more local context. Is this a particular problem, and how's the success rate for solving those crimes going?
Thank you, Councillor Whiteside. I'll ask Chief Inspector Morrison to respond to that one, please.
Yeah, Councillor Whiteside, it's an ongoing thing. There's times where we go through peaks and troughs. We had a specific period there where it was really quiet. We're obviously into the next quarter, and I've seen a real upturn in this type of crime again. Successfully, we do detect a lot of these crimes. We don't always get the property back. That's the difficulty. We find that it's normally travelling criminals, and then we link several crimes together, sometimes up to into double figures of crimes, and we get CCTV opportunities our way, and we can link it all back and detect the crimes. But obviously the difficulty is trying to get the property back, because most of the people are not too forthcoming about that. I go back there, and I said this probably at one of my very first meetings, we're still seeing where you're right, quad bikes are getting stolen, but they're getting stolen from insecure sheds, or keys are being left hanging up in a secure shed. As soon as they're in the shed, they've got keys for vehicles and that. So yeah, it's a difficult thing to prevent, but everyone can help themselves by being a wee bit more security conscious.
Okay, thanks for that. Could I just ask, could you remind me where to get contact details for the rural crime officer?
It's I'll send you some details, but it's Rick Sibley, the inspector from Montrose locality, is now taking that responsibility.
Thanks very much.
If you would forward that on, please, Wayne.
Right, yeah, no problem.
Bill Duff, Councillor Duff, page 55.
Sorry, it was more of a comment really than a question, but I noticed at the bottom of 55 on challenges, you've identified that we get lots of reports of speeding from the public that are actually, the issue is they can't estimate speed, not that there's actually speeding. And certainly as a councillor, I get an awful lot of complaints about speeding, some of which are, rather difficult to believe, because the speeds that are quoted in the roads, it doesn't make sense. But I think it's reassuring in a way that the police have got the same issue, that people have a perception of speed that is greater than the actual speed, and it does seem to be a bit of an issue. It's more of a comment than a question.
Yeah, I could just come in on the back of that. I had similar complaints from one particular area in Arbroath, and the police at that time went out and did a covert speed check, and none of the vehicles were travelling at more than 30 miles an hour. So it was a case that it was perception rather than fact. Right, can we move on to Councillor Bray's page 56?
Yes, thank you very much, convener. Could I just say first, regarding rural crime, there's a highly successful and well-functioning neighbourhood watch scheme that operates in my ward, around about the Edsall and the Glens and across Menure, and that's maybe something worth resurrecting. Maybe other members might be interested in that. My question on page 56, at the bottom of page 56, we have a table of motor vehicle offences committed while under drink or drugs. And the first two entries in that table, the first entry is driving a motor vehicle while under influence of controlled drug above limit. And that's fallen from 42 to 22, nearly halved. The next entry, driving a motor vehicle while unfit through drink or drugs, has doubled from 15 to 30. I wonder if you could maybe tell us a wee bit more about that information. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. During the lockdown period, we've maintained across Scotland our roads policing capability and capacity, and in some instances actually increased it. So despite the number of vehicles on the road rightfully dropping significantly, particularly during the lockdown periods, we've maintained that presence. What that has meant is that we've been able to maintain the proactivity around road safety and some of the offences committed on the roads and the use of the roads infrastructure to commit other offences such as trafficking controlled drugs. Where we have some challenge, and again, my apologies to councillors and committee for resurrecting changes in recording practices, but actually what we've got this quarter now in Q4 that we've just gone into is the first direct comparable with previous years around drink and drug driving. And that's as a consequence of this time last year, the introduction of drug wipes, which allow us to make an assessment scientifically as to the drugs within somebody's system. And what that means, if I can be blunt, is that our figures are a bit all over the place, because what we would originally have charged somebody with being under the influence and have to prove that they were perhaps unfit, we now just need to prove that they have a quantity within their body, and it's a much more scientific and more evidence-based way of dealing with it. That means that it's a challenge for us to read across the two. So I think if we look at the numbers combined, what it demonstrates is that we've maintained the same proactivity in that area despite a significant downturn in the volume of vehicles actually on the road.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I did suspect it was something to do with the reporting and with the drug wipes introduction. Thank you.
All right, now next one up again, Councillor Brays on page 71.
Yes, thanks, convener. Yes, this is, I suppose, it relates to the city of Dundee, so it's really more for my own information. I do note that there is a very low level of wildlife crime committed in Dundee, and I wondered if this is entirely focused on the countryside that's within the city boundary, or whether there is actually wildlife crime committed within the urban area of Dundee, and if so, what sort of incidents do you see there?
I mean, the volume of wildlife crimes committed in any urban environment is incredibly low. There may be some persecution of protected animals. You know, if there was badgers in a set within a ground within a city environment, or perhaps bats within a building that was being torn down. That type of activity, but they tend to not occur within urban environments by virtue of people can see what folks are doing much more easily, much more quickly, and they tend to be more within the rural environment, not just around actual wildlife, but also environmental crimes tend to happen more within the rural area. So the figures are what they are, and it's not through any lack of attention or focus. Where they occur, we will deal with them, no matter if it's urban, rural, remote. Makes no difference, but the prevalence of them, just for common sense reasons, is much more predominantly focused in the rural areas rather than urban.
That's fine, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Whiteside, page 72 and 73.
Thanks, convener. It was around the COVID-19 offences, and I was just curious with the 69 fixed penalty notices, whether that was predominantly private individuals and households or businesses. And following on from that, the numbers on the next page regarding complaints about officers, it was a high percentage around officers not wearing PPE and not social distancing. So it was just a little bit more context around that. I don't know whether it's just the nature of the type of work that they're doing.
So thank you, Councillor. In regards to the Optala tickets, they are only issued to adults, not to juveniles and not to businesses. If a business were to conduct itself, then we have recourse that we could perhaps, if it's a licensed premises, take it to the relevant licensing board for a consideration, or work with colleagues in local authority around trading standards. The vast majority of premises have worked really hard to make sure that their customers are as safe as they possibly can be when it is that they've been opening. So all of this is around the people, and within the Angus area, predominantly we have seen a huge amount of compliance, and we continue to see that, but there are still pockets of non-compliance which Wayne and his team deal with using that 4E's approach, and we are moving more quickly to the enforcement element, because we tend to find that we've already done the educate and encourage, and the enforcement bit is coming to us faster than it was at the beginning of the lockdown period. In regards to complaints about the police, this is a challenging area for us. What we are finding is that a number of our community want us to do more and complain when we don't around COVID-19 enforcement, and a lot of our community want us to do less and complain about us when we don't. So as a divisional commander, I'm almost treading a line that you could assume means that I want to please nobody, because half the people want me to do more and the other half want me to do less. So if I please none of the people, then I'm actually doing a good job, because I'm treading that line. Now, I am being slightly flippant there, and I don't intend to be over such an important issue. But what we are finding is that it's very, very difficult just now when people's views are quite stark. And clearly, if we're engaging with somebody who has breached lockdown, potentially committed other crimes, they're not always going to be the most supportive character to our actions. So inevitably, they put a complaint in about what it is that we've done. But the reality is they were probably breaking the law before we went and spoke to them, because proactive interventions just to engage with the public for no good reason, other than just to build some community engagement, are not priorities right now, given the public health emergency that's ongoing. So most of our engagements are related to actions we need to take in response to other people taking certain courses of conduct. So those figures, whilst look stark and high, don't cause me any cause for concern. The use of PPE, we've got more than sufficient. We've got good lines of equipment coming in. Our use of the equipment is appropriate to our engagement, so I'm happy that staff are using them. And our health and safety policies within the division are providing a significant amount of overlay to make sure that we're doing everything as we've designed and as our risk assessments tell us we need to do. It is a high risk activity, policing in general, and we do all that we can to minimise that risk, albeit we can't eliminate it. But the use of PPE and the wearing of it is an easy one for us to use as a mitigating factor for the risk that's presented.
Thanks, that's really reassuring. It was just the figure jumped out there, but that's great. Thank you.
Right, if that is everything on item 5, we're asked to review, note and scrutinise. We've scrutinised. Do we agree to note?
Agreed.
Thank you. I think we can now excuse the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and Police Scotland, let them get back to their day jobs, and we'll continue with the meeting. On, I think it will probably be Kirsty Hunter to speak to the Angus Alive report, which is item 6, page 76.
Yes, thank you, convener, and good afternoon to all committee members. I'm absolutely delighted on behalf of the Board of Directors to present Angus Alive's annual report for 2019-20. As members are aware from recent updates that have come to full council, the coronavirus pandemic has significantly impacted the charity's ability to operate in the current financial year due to the restrictions that have been in place to suppress the virus in Scotland. However, the publication of this report provides a really important reminder of our achievements throughout 2019-20, prior to the point where we were required to close all of our venues as a result of the pandemic in mid-March. It also provides an opportunity to reflect on the positive contribution that we made to community planning priorities during that year. And if you look at page 89 of the combined papers or page 11 of the report, you'll be able to see a summary table of that information. I do hope that members enjoyed reading the report and find it a useful summary of another action-packed year for the charity. These activities were delivered by our dedicated team, including many volunteers who make a valued contribution to the work that we do for the local communities of Angus. The range and quality of culture, sport and leisure services, events and activities are highlighted to demonstrate our important contribution to the health and well-being of everybody living, working and also visiting the County of Angus. There's a section to bring to life each of our 9 strategic aims, which are derived from our charitable purposes registered with Oscar and also our articles of association. Although, of course, you will appreciate that we can't include everything in the report because there's far too much that's delivered by the team and enjoyed by people locally to include within the content of the pages. There are, however, 11 case studies in the 1920 annual report that help to further elaborate the key themes from the activities, events and services that Angus Alive has programmed and presented to change lives by inspiring healthy, active and creative lifestyle choices. This year, we've chosen to showcase partnership working, external funding, volunteering, new programmes and venue development, as well as employee training and increasing accessibility to everyone. We'd also like to thank Sports Scotland for their partner contribution at the end of the report. The hard work and commitment across the team, including the support services that we've received from council colleagues, combined with the changes as a result of completion of the organisational review, resulted in an operational surplus at year end of £451,130. You'll recall that at that time, we were just going into the pandemic and lockdown. So in light of that, the board made a strategic decision to retain the maximum available level of general reserves, and therefore no contribution to the R&R fund was made in 1920 for the first time since we came into existence. Just like to note at this point that respectively the levels of our reserves were 1.6 million and for R&R fund were 945,000 at year end on the 31st of March 2020. This year we've provided a how we stack up summary, which provides information over the last 4 years, the full 4 years of operation. I'd just like to highlight at this point, I think there's one number that is actually missing from that, and I'll be able to share that via committee services, and that's in the sports centres attendances, and that was 1,284,966. But more generally, what I wanted to take the opportunity to highlight is that we did start to see numbers and attendances slipping from about the middle of January, but particularly through February, and then obviously there was no operation of services from the middle of March, so that has impacted numbers. There are, of course, significant challenges ahead, but the changes that we've implemented, both to the structure, investments in training of our team, providing them with new equipment and systems to help them to do their jobs, as well as the financial stewardship that's been sustained by the board and the senior management team throughout the period of the charity coming into existence in 2015, has meant that every year we've been able to make a contribution to both our R&R fund and our reserves. And that is going to put us in a strong position to tackle whatever comes next, working of course in partnership with the council and other partners locally and nationally. And at this opportunity, I just wanted to say a thank you to members for your support during this difficult time over the past current year, as that has been very much appreciated. Our new normal will of course take time to emerge and almost certainly look different, but we will remain optimistic about the future, as Angus Alive's vision of changing lives by inspiring healthy, active and creative lifestyle choices resonates more strongly today than it ever has, with the emphasis on supporting the physical and mental health and well-being of the nation as we go through and beyond this public health emergency. I think that our annual report is a timely reminder of the positive outcomes that we deliver, along with the joy that this brings to everybody involved. You just have to look at the photographs of customers, visitors and employees to get an idea of that. And that's particularly important as we are now counting down, hopefully, to safely reopening our doors from the 26th of April. All of our team are very much looking forward to welcoming everybody back to get healthy, active and creative with us again. And I'd open up the floor for questions.
Okay, bids for questions. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, convener. Page 117. It's on the appendix and then a general comment.
Right, anyone else? Okay, page 117, Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Kirsty, for the update. It was after the last sort of report we had like this that I think I maybe requested that we have something like this in appendix to the table that shows the breakdown of how all this is achieved. And you've kind of answered one of my questions, which was the attendance figure. We're sort of seeing the sports centre attendances drop, and I know you touched on that. Is there any sort of understanding as to what's happening there? And also looking at our museums and galleries statistics, we've seen a significant drop in museum attendance it's almost halved in since 1617 to 1920, and also the amount of exhibitions held has gone from 79 to 34. Just wonder if there's any sort of comments on that, but also thank you for providing the table, because I do think it's really useful. And generally speaking, I did enjoy the report. I thought there's some fantastic stuff going on in it. Really liked the piece on the autism-friendly work that was done in the February. And obviously, it'd be brilliant if we could see going forward when we get back to normal, more things like that happening. Thanks.
Are you ready for me to answer, Convener?
Yes, carry on, Convener.
Yep. So I'll take maybe not in the order that you gave them, and if I miss any and didn't quite write them down, please do come back to me, Councillor MacDonald. In terms of the number of exhibitions, that's a direction of travel that is a chosen direction of travel. So in Angus, historically, there were lots of temporary exhibitions that were, I would say, churned through. So there was always the focus on presenting the next exhibition quickly, getting the next one up and then the next one. That is not what you see nationally. What you see is exhibitions, the temporary exhibition programme being in place for longer, but the quality of those exhibitions being of a higher standard because there's more time to plan, prepare and present them. So that is something that was expected, and I would see that reflected in the future. And we do attend meetings with regional partners across the whole of the Tayside area, and it's exactly the same kind of approach that they're taking to their exhibition programming as well. With regard to the sports centre attendances, I think that there's a few different things at play there. One of them is that the marketplace for sport and physical activity has changed dramatically over the past 5 years. People are choosing to exercise in different ways. We were, as a result of that, in discussions with a partner, Alliance Leisure, just prior to going into lockdown, and we'd also been discussing with the client some changes that we'd like to make to the estate to adapt what is available to customers to hopefully target some of the more functional training that people are looking for these days. But we do obviously have a situation where we very much benefit from having a shared estate with colleagues in schools and learning, but we obviously need to make sure that the facilities that are provided meet the requirements of physical education, but also meet the requirements of the community within limited space. So it's something that we'll be looking to work through as we come out, and obviously the funds that we have in the R&R fund will be something that's there to help to move and transition to those new ways of exercising. I think the other thing that I would highlight is that we have, during the pandemic, introduced the Angus Alive app to again support new and different ways that people are choosing to engage with exercise, to make sure that they can do that from the safety and comfort of their own homes, and also not just safety and comfort, but also flexibility. And what we've had in terms of feedback from customers is that they've been able to attend some of the classes that they would never have been able to attend in person, just due to timing and flexibility of schedules. So that's something that we'll be looking to retain as we go forward into the post-COVID recovery phase and then beyond. There are also changes that we were implementing to the membership fees of the Be Active membership that were coming into place just at the beginning of January this year, and that was reducing the price point for the vast majority of our Be Active members. But obviously direct debits were not taken for January since we were closed at that point, and those changes will come into effect later in this year as we reintroduce charges once we're able to start reopening. I'm not sure, I think I've covered everything, but if I've missed any of the points that you made, please do.
Just the gallery attendance?
Yes.
Did I miss that, or?
No, I didn't cover that yet. So there's two different things to note there. One is that as a result of the organisational review, we did have a significant changeover in employees, and not everybody we identified had the full training in how to record the numbers, but we've only demonstrated in the report the numbers that were recorded at the time. But we have now conducted additional training to ensure that everybody is recording that information. Combined with that, however, I would acknowledge that the days that we are open within our museums and galleries has been changed as a result of the opening times being modified during the winter period to bring us into line with other visitor attractions in Angus, and only have extended weekend openings during the winter period.
Okay. All right. Councillor Wan, you've appeared.
I have appeared, Chair. Thank you very much. It's on the same page, 117, Kirsty. A quick question on that. But first of all, can I just say thanks very much for the report, and appreciate everything that Angus Alive has done during this COVID period to kind of change and adapt to the circumstances. I think what you've got here is fantastic. And it's good to hear that the app will continue, or certainly you'll still be able to do virtual classes even after the sports centres open, because I presume some folk will prefer to do it in the comfort of their own home rather than maybe in a gym for a period of time after this anyway. But my question is on 117, as I said, and it's actually data protection breaches. I noticed that they've kind of doubled since the 18-19 period. Is that something that, is it something that's done by the staff accidentally? Has there been training put into place to ensure that these data protection breaches don't keep happening?
So what I would acknowledge there is that they're low. They're still data protection breaches, but they're at the low level in terms of the severity of them. And actually, it's the training that has been undertaken that has helped us to identify those, and therefore increase the reporting of any of the breaches that happen, and make sure that that information is then fed back to our information officer, and then we liaise with colleagues in the council to identify whether that then has to be reported further to Information Commissioner or not, as the case may be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's everything. The recommendations are that we review the Angus Alive report, and we review the performance information summary. Do we agree to note the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 7, Angus Community Justice Partnership Annual Review Activity Return Report, starting on page 118. Can I ask Jim Hammond to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Convener. The report presents work in Angus, services either individually or in partnership, deliver on the 7 national outcomes you can see within the report, but also local outcomes. Those who've been involved, really targeting those who are involved or in the cusp of becoming involved in offending behaviour. The report period covers from April 2019 to March 2020, so to an extent it is a historical report that highlights the wide range of partnership working that's undertaken by both statutory partners, council departments, council services, and also voluntary services as well. I think what the report does is highlight the maturity of the partnership as it's developed to the last 3 years, and this reporting period saw the third and final year of the strategic plan. So in itself provided a really valuable baseline of self-evaluation for the development of the new strategic plan, which is now in place and the partnership are working to. That's just the brief introduction, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, Convener. Oh, is it page one? Page one. Oh, I've lost it now. 132.
132. Okay, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I have a comment on page 125 and a question on page 137, please. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Devine.
Page 127 and 138.
Okay then, we'll start off with you, Councillor Devine, on page 127.
Yes, Jim, this is a very small thing, but it is about acronyms, and a particularly difficult acronym would be SMD, and I really don't know. I was told about it at my meeting, our group meeting last night, and I've already forgotten it. So do you know that?
I do not know that, but I will take that back, Lynn, and get that feedback to you.
Thank you. It's better to avoid these things in such reports.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. As a general rule, if we're putting these acronyms, can we have a list of them at the start of the report, please?
Absolutely, that's a very important point, and we'll take that forward for future reporting.
Thank you.
Okay, then Councillor Whiteside, page 132.
Thanks very much, and thanks, Jim. It's a fabulous report. There's an awful lot that could be commented on in it. I just wanted to briefly comment on the rapid rehousing transition plan section and the Housing First initiative. I think that is something to be really commended, and it really avoids a lot of further issues for people if they can be rehoused very quickly. So I think it's absolutely great. The question is around the percentage of homeless households that were housed dropped quite a bit, and just wonder if there's any background to that.
I think as a general comment for those who know me on committee know that my background is education and lifelong learning, and I have strategic overview for the plan, and I have oversight of making sure that the plan is delivered. And I don't hold that operational knowledge, so what I'll happily go back and get information in regards to that, Councillor Whiteside.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Next one is Councillor Bell, question on page 137.
Great, thank you, convener. Jim, thank you. I fully appreciate. I've seen this a couple of times already, but I've decided I wanted to pick up on this particular issue. In the right-hand column, the second paragraph around cases being heard on solemn procedure in courts out with Angus, and the issue is that the sheriffs may not have enough pertinent information. It does concern me that our citizens are maybe not getting the best possible outcome if the sheriffs don't have details about the most suitable sentencing recommendations. So I wondered what was being done specifically to address that.
Again, Councillor Bell, I'll take that back to the partnership and provide a response in due course.
Okay, thanks. And I just wondered, actually, we use case studies to tell really powerful stories, and quite often we might have sheriffs who have powerful case studies that could be used in a peer-to-peer way to help spread the word about what the options are. And I just wonder if that might be something that could be considered.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, Julie, we'll pick that up in the partnership itself.
Okay.
I've seen that Catherine Lindsay has come in there. Do you want to contribute at this stage, Catherine?
Yes, please, convener, if I can. And it was just on that question, which is a fairly operational question that as the chair of the group, Jim, wouldn't necessarily have that detail. But in relation to the sentencing of individuals in courts out with Angus, it was just to provide assurance to members that we are asked to provide information to courts for sentencing purposes, regardless of where that court is sitting. And that might be, for example, also in England and Wales. So we've got arrangements to make key information available. There are sometimes difficulties, and I think this is where the report indicates where there's consideration for remand. So usually a remand would be dealt with without recourse to a formal report in advance of that, and that may happen on the day. But we do have arrangements with each of the social work departments that cover any court setting to provide that information and advice on our behalf. So we always have a duty worker available to provide that kind of detail, and if we receive a phone call saying one of your individuals is looking likely for remand, then we would be able to provide all the detail they require to furnish the court with to prevent an unnecessary remand in custody. I'm not saying that would necessarily be foolproof, nor will it prevent the use of custody sometimes where we might feel there is an alternative, but that is of course the decision of the judge or the sheriff who's hearing the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Right then.
Chair, just before we go on, I can answer Councillor Devine's around the acronyms. It's severe and multiple disadvantage.
Thank you.
Right. And we're back with Councillor Devine on page 138.
Yeah, I think this might be a bit operational too, Jim. So apologies. It's about ADARS, which I think is a superb organisation, and in fact got a COSLA award a couple of years ago. And it says that 90% of people engaged in treatment for drugs 3 weeks after receipt of referral, which is fantastic. But I do recognise this is a bit of a historical report, but we do have such a problem with drugs in Angus, perhaps not as much as in Dundee, but certainly in Angus. And I wondered, what is going wrong here if we are actually managing to see 90% of the people so quickly? Is it because there are many who are not engaging at all? I mean, if you have to get back to me, that's fine. I do recognise it's very difficult one.
Unless there's colleagues on the call that have that operational background, Lynn, and are happy to come in, I will get back to you on that one.
Oh, Catherine, you trying to come in?
So I'm happy to come in and just to, I guess, indicate that information and detail would be available through colleagues in the Health and Social Care Partnership. So I think we could make a request for them perhaps to provide some detail around that. But in terms of the kind of broader context, it is obviously one successful measure of having the service available and its ability to respond, which is that timescale of the 3 weeks of engaging someone. But what we know is that substance misuse and most other complex issues take an awful long time for people to manage to change. And that can mean engaging and then disengaging repeatedly before somebody is ready to actually change their behaviour in a way that other people would notice. So sometimes the success criteria for somebody's care pathway in terms of a substance misuse treatment programme would be a reduction in usage, not a cessation of usage, or perhaps less risky usage. Or usage that isn't impacting so much on the community around them, or perhaps their family or their own health and well-being. So whilst the 3 week figure is extremely positive, it's only the very, very beginning of a journey for some people that may take years. So I'm quite happy for us to go back to the Health and Social Care Partnership and to ask if perhaps they might come back with a bit more context for Councillor Devine in particular. But I just wanted to set that in a wee bit of context. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. I mean, I don't think I do need the partnership to give me any more information. I think that's absolutely right, that the dip in and out of the treatment, which is going to take quite a long time to see any success. But yeah, thanks very much.
Okay, Councillor Bell, you want to make a comment on page 125?
Yes, I do. Thanks, convener. Obviously, the Glen Island, the Glen Clover project are projects very close to my heart, and it's hard to tell from black and white tables on the page, but I think it's worth picking out that the collective visit to the First Minister's question time, which was by invitation of Graham Day, the Angus South MSP, and I was part of that visit, was actually fantastic fun. It was very informative. All the women were incredibly engaged and interested, and we had a fantastic Q&A with Graham after First Minister's question time, and they were asking really, really tough questions, which was fantastic. But it's just a great example of how valuable these projects are and the difference that it makes to the women involved in them, and their growth, their personal growth is amazing. And it is very hard to pick this up from a document like this, but it's really important, I think, that committee members realise that these services are having incredibly powerful and tangible effects on the people involved in them and their families. And I wanted to pay credit to everyone involved in those services. And I hope Jim can pass that back. Thank you.
Happy to pass that back, Julie.
Right, we seem to have come to the end of that particular one. The recommendation is that we scrutinise the content. So do we agree to note that report?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can I call upon Kathy Wiley to take us through the internal audit activity update commencing on page 144?
Yes, thank you. So starting on page 144, this is the normal activity report that looks at the progress with the planned internal audit work and the implementation of the internal audit and counter fraud recommendations. We've also got in this report on page 145 at section 4, just an update for you around some guidance that CIPFA had issued in response to COVID-19 and the impact that that has on the annual opinion, which I need to provide in June to you for the year 2021. There is a potential that there might be a need for a limitation of scope in heads of internal audit arriving at their opinion. I've been able at this stage to put in alternative arrangements up to now, and at this stage I'm not anticipating that there would be a need for me to report a limitation of scope in arriving at my opinion. Obviously I'm keeping that under observation, and I will come back to you and give you an update in April, and obviously will consult with members of CLT and the Corporate Governance Officers Group if there's any change to that in the meantime. That situation is dependent on some of the work that's already in the plan being finalised, but at this stage I don't have any indication that that won't be the case. So that's really just to give you an update on that. And if I move on now, this time round we don't have very much to report. It's not that long since we had the last meeting. So page 154, we have information about the data analysis that we do in the continuous auditing, looking at payroll and accounts payable, creditors. And for the period from October to December 2020, the testing that we do has come up with comprehensive assurance around both of those areas. Again, just wanted to draw attention very briefly to the fact that for the first time since we started looking at the instances of payments that had been made where the same person had registered and authorised a payment, there were no instances in November 2020. So that's good to see that. There are usually a few instances which are always, or so far have always been satisfactorily explained. The rest of this report goes on then to provide information about the internal audit and counter fraud actions that are still outstanding. I don't have anything in particular that I'd like to bring to your attention other than just to say that we've had a bit of discussion with officers just to try and make sure that people review the items that are outstanding to make sure that they are still actually relevant, and if there's any reason, for example, due to things that have changed due to COVID-19, that we do actually revisit these actions and take them out of the outstanding actions if they're no longer relevant.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Bids for questions? There are no questions. The recommendations are to note the report. Do we agree to note the report?
Agreed.
And now move on to the last report, item number 9, which is the Internal Audit Plan 2021-22, commencing on page 161. Kathy, please.
Thank you. Again, this is the plan for 21-22. It seems not that long ago since I was speaking to you about plans, but we did a revision of the plan for 2021 and I think it was September last year, so it's not that long ago. We followed the usual process for preparing this plan, looking at it from a risk-based perspective, considering the corporate risk register, talking to officers. We asked members of the committee if they had anything that they would like us to consider when we were putting the plan together. And the process that we've followed has really just been the same as it has been in previous years. There's only one difference in terms of what I'm presenting you here today to what we would have done in the past. And that is on page 173, I've set out the fact that I've split the plan into 2 sections. There's a set plan, which starts on page 173, which are the items which we would anticipate being able to deliver this year. And then starting on page 178, there are items in a pool from which we will take items as and when it's appropriate to do so during the course of the year. We do have the same number of days available to the team this year as we would have done in normal circumstances last year. The temporary post in counter fraud has been extended for a year. And on page 171, there are pie charts which show from an audit perspective how the time is going to be spent over the various headings within the plan. And I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that in the first chart there, you'll see that the audit pool accounts for 19% of the time that's been allocated for audit. We do have audits in the set programme that cover all of the headings, so I'm not concerned that we would be light in any of these areas if we don't manage to pull things from the pool in under those headings. And I would just like to caution that although we have some time in for contingency, we are finding that things are taking a bit longer to complete than they used to do. And so we may not be able to use all of that 19% of time on new projects, but certainly I would anticipate using some of that time for pool items. I don't think there's anything else particularly that I want to draw attention to in this. I'm happy to discuss any items that I have in the pool that you think should be in the set programme, or any items that you think are missing from the pool, but otherwise happy to take questions.
Fine. Bids for questions, please. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Page 176, convener.
Okay, anyone else? Right, page 176, Councillor Bell.
Thank you. Kathy, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on your comments about the contingency element. And, you know, to me, that the schedule seems pretty jam-packed, and I'm concerned about your capacity to even consider any ad hoc requests. But I guess you would have some trigger points of things that might emerge. I guess based on past years, is there any scope for you to push back on things that might emerge from different areas of the council in order to help you prioritise that? It's a huge agenda, and I really do value the amount of work that goes into all of this. And I'm just thinking about how could life be made easier, I guess, in a very challenging environment.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a couple of things just to comment on that. One of the things that we are doing is we're trying to make sure when we scope any piece of work that we scope that as narrowly as possible, but to still give us the level of assurance that we need to make sure that we're not doing any additional work that doesn't actually add anything to the overall assurance level that we're able to provide. But in terms of the ad hoc work, we don't report everything to the committee, but we do get quite a lot of questions from people who'll just get in touch with members of the team that they know to ask them about clarification of items in financial regulations, or they've come across something that they've not had to deal with before and they're not sure how they should take it forward. And so there is a bit of time that's just spent in kind of providing guidance and helping people to signpost where to find the correct procedures, etc. And it's very difficult to sort of estimate how much time that's going to take up in each year, but it doesn't take up a massive amount of time usually. And certainly we're keen to still keep that kind of work under, happening, because otherwise people will end up doing things they shouldn't be doing and making wrong decisions. So it's better to give them that advice at the outset if they've asked for it. And I have been encouraging people to come and ask us for advice rather than wait until something gets into a bit of a muddle before they come and ask for advice.
Okay. Anyone else? If there's no one else, the recommendations are to note the report and to consider and approve the proposed 2021-22 internal audit plan. Do we agree to note and agree the report? Thank you very much, everybody. I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. So thank you very much, and we'll see most of you again on Thursday.
Thanks, convener.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.